Hey guys, welcome back to another great game of CEDH. Starting today off is Hidden on Slicer, the epitome of aggro. This killer robot is here for blood. With a bunch of stacks and an equipment sub-package, this deck is speed incarnate. He had an opening hand of a Mountain, Mishra's Workshop, Welding Jar, Roiling Earthquake, Rending Volley, Lightning Bolt, and a Grim Monolith. Next up is Darren with Tymna Kraum. This is the quintessential value commander pairing, letting you gain card advantage on two separate axes, while also having access to all the powerful combos CEDH is known for. He had an opening hand of a Plateau, Marsh Flats, Badlands, Enlightened Tutor, Flusterstorm, Cabal Ritual, and an Orcish Bowmaster. In the third spot is Griffin on Sisay Weatherlight Captain. This is Tutor Chain Sisay, aiming to use your commander's ability to instant speed tutor up either combos or silver bullets. His opening hand was a Marsh Flats, Soul Ring, Mental Misstep, Arcane Signet, Snap, Kinnan, and a Resculpt. And bringing up the rear is Noah on Inalla. You honestly need to be a wizard to pilot this list. It's an intricate Grixis combo list, aiming for Spellseeker loops. His opening hand had a Verdant Catacombs, Vampiric Tutor, Fellwar Stone, Simian Spirit Guide, and a Rhystic Study, bottoming both a Wheel of Fortune and an Intuition.
Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board.
Hidden starts off the game with a Mishra's Workshop into a Grim Monolith, ending his turn with a Welding Jar. Darren has a much quicker turn, just playing out a Plateau as land. Griffin plays out a Marsh Flats and cracks it for an Underground Sea, shortcutting as he casts a Soul Ring into an Arcane Signet. Noah heads to his turn and cracks a Verdant Catacombs for an Underground Sea. He exiles a Spirit Guide for a red and ends his turn with a Fellwar Stone. Hidden has a Hammerheim as land and, not wanting to tap his Monolith yet, casts the backside of Slicer, with Darren in response casting an Enlightened Tutor for a Mana Crypt. Hidden then turns Slicer at Darren for 3, who can't block, letting Hidden transform Slicer and hand the turn over. Darren untaps and gains Slicer. He has a Marsh Flats as land and cracks it for an Underground Sea. His tutored Mana Crypt then comes out, with him being able to cast his commander Tymna. This definitely is a downside for Slicer, as the robot heads at Griffin for 6, letting Darren pay a life on his second main to draw one off Tymna. Griffin untaps and gains Slicer. He plays out a City of Brass into Kinnan. He then heads to combat and, to spread the love around, attacks Noah for 6, with Griffin ending his turn casting an Emil. Noah then gets Slicer and has a Scalding Tarn as land for turn. He then fetches out a Volcanic Island and for 3 casts a Rhystic Study. The enchantment resolves, with Slicer getting sent at Darren for 6. Hidden plays out a Mountain and casts a Roiling Earthquake, where X equals 2. He can pay the 1 for Rhystic and gets to clear the board out. Slicer then attacks Darren for 6, with Hidden being done after that. Darren has a fast turn as he untaps, gets Slicer, and plays out a Badlands as land for turn. He then sends the robot at Griffin for 6 and passes. Griffin follows Darren's lead as he sends Slicer for another 6 at Noah, passing after that. Noah starts off with combat. He sends Slicer at Darren, with him on his second main playing out an Otawaro as land for turn, and for 2 casting a Talisman of Dominance. Hidden has another Mountain, and from all the table talk, knows Darren has an answer to Slicer. He wants to get it out of the way immediately and sends Slicer his way, with Darren in response Chain of Vaporing it back to Hidden's hand. He gives a card to Noah off the Rhystic, and Hidden chooses not to continue the chain, with Hidden on his second main recasting Slicer and still paying for the Rhystic. Darren heads to his turn and gets Slicer. He has a City of Brass as land, with this time casting his other commander Kraum. He doesn't pay the tax and then heads to combat, swinging 6 at Noah, but passing after that. Griffin gets the robot and casts his commander Sisay. It's a feed Noah kind of game as he draws off Rhystic. Griffin then heads Slicer at Darren, who blocks with Kraum. First strike damage happens, but before normal damage happens, Hidden sacrifices his welding jar to let Slicer have a regen bubble to let him take out the Kraum while surviving himself. With Noah at end step vamping. He'll lose 2 and finds a card to put on top. Noah is quick to head to his turn as he slams down a Spellseeker, although he's quick to backtrack to play out a command tower as land. The Spellseeker will resolve and get him an Inalla trigger, which he'll stack under the ETB of the Spellseeker. And here's where politics comes into play, as Noah states that he has no interaction and is willing to not try to combo off and instead get removal for the Slicer. The table end up agreeing and he ends up getting an Essence Flux and a Slaughter Pact. He then heads to combat and sends the token Spellseeker at Hidden, with the Slicer going at Griffin, who, instead of chumping with his commander, instead snaps Slicer back. He doesn't pay the Ristic, and Hidden ends up taking 1 for the turn. Hidden then heads to his turn and recasts the backside of Slicer. He can pay for Ristic, and left with the floating artifact mana, casts a Soul Ring. He pays once again for Ristic, and then swings Slicer at Darren, who can take the 3 without dying, with Hidden ending his turn with a Weathered Runestone. Unfortunately, finally giving a card to Noah. Darren untaps, gains Slicer, and takes 3 from his crypt. He has a Bloodstained Mire as land and cracks it to grab out a Volcanic Island. He then recasts Tymna and wants his mana more than giving a card to Noah, as Darren then heads to combat. Hidden does try to persuade him to send it at Griffin, as Noah has shown the Essence Flux, but alas, as the archenemy, Darren does not listen and sends Slicer Noah's way. Anyway, Noah blocks with the Spellseeker and then casts an Essence Flux, targeting the wizard. But it's actually Griffin who has a response, as he casts a Mental Misstep and even pays the 1 for the Ristic. Damage then happens and kills the Spellseeker. Griffin untaps, gains Slicer, and casts a Lothos. He doesn't pay the 1 and then heads to combat. He sends Slicer at Darren, who chumps with Tymna, ending Griffin's turn there. Noah gains the robot and plays out a Flooded Strand. For 1, he then casts an Aether Spellbomb into a Talisman of Creativity. He follows that up with a dashed Ragavan, sending the monkey at Darren and the Slicer at Griffin. We do catch the Miss Lotho trigger as Griffin casts a Resculpt on the Slicer. He'll pay for the Ristic, with Noah getting a 4/4 and Darren exiling a 1 ring off the top. Noah decides to not cast it as he passes there. Hidden is really feeling this game slip away as he casts a Slag Storm to clear almost all the creatures back off the board, and pays for the Ristic. Darren is safe from his crypt and plays out a Flooded Strand as land for turn. Both of his commanders cost 7 as he recasts Kraum. He gives a card to Noah and passes. Griffin plays and cracks a Polluted Delta, with Noah also saving time as he cracks his fetch for a tapped Watery Grave, as Griffin grabs out a Badlands himself. Noah starts off his turn with a Demonic Tutor, which surprisingly to Noah actually resolves. He finds a card to hand and then for 4 casts a Talion. This will trigger Kraum to let Darren draw, with Noah naming 2 as it enters. Hidden heads to his turn and pays 1 for a Lotus Petal, ending his turn there. Darren takes 3 from his crypt and casts an Esper Sentinel. He pays for the Ristic and follows it up with a Wishclaw Talisman. He'll take 2 off Talion, but pays for the Ristic. The Wishclaw resolves, with Darren using it to tutor immediately. He finds a card to hand and hands the Talisman over to Hidden, as that's the best case for now. Griffin then heads to his turn and recasts Sisay. He'll take 2 from Talion, but does pay for the Ristic. Noah starts off his turn with a Dockside. Hidden will crack his Petal, with Noah making 7 treasures off the ETB. Noah then puts a Thassa's Oracle onto the stack, which will trigger Kraum to give Darren a card, with the Thassa's resolving and Noah casting a Tainted Pact in response to the ETB. Noah will pay for the Esper Sentinel, with Griffin responding with a fierce guardianship. He can't pay for either Rhystic or Esper. Both players draw, with Noah in an act of desperation ad nauseing, with Darren not taking any chances and flusterstorms it. He doesn't pay for the Rhystic and points 4 at the Adnos and 1 at the Tainted Pact. The stack then starts resolving with Noah's Adnos and Tainted Pact getting countered, and Noah looking at the top 4 with Thassa's and keeping 1 on top. A Mox Diamond then comes out with Noah discarding a Crystal Vein. He then attempts to bounce his Dockside with a Spell Bomb, to which Hidden uses his floating red mana to Lightning Bolt the Goblin. He pays for both Rhystic and Ezra Sentinel, with Noah ending his turn sending his 4/4 Elemental at Darren, who jumps with his Esper. Hidden has a Buried Ruin as land return, and then activates the Wish Claw. He's not happy how this game has gone, and worries Darren is just going to untap and win, as Hidden finds a card, and hoping he can take Darren out, gives the Talisman back to him. Hidden actually has an answer to Kraum in hand, and is hoping to tutor up something to let him win next turn. Hidden then casts a Rending Volley on Kraum, and pays 1 for the Rhystic. Hidden then casts the backside of Slicer, and due to it being a vehicle, doesn't actually trigger Talion either, as Hidden then uses the last of his mana to pay for the Rhystic. Hidden then heads to combat and sends Slicer at Darren, who in response taps his city for a black and exiles a Simian Spirit Guide to let him cast an Orcish Bowmaster. He'll take 2 from Talion and draw Noah an extra card off the Rhystic, with the Bowmaster unfortunately for Hidden resolving. He pings Noah for 1 and gives Darren a 1/1 2-jump Slicer, letting him live through the turn. Hidden doesn't even get to flip Slicer as he ends his turn there. Darren untaps and rolls for Crypt. He takes 3 and starts it off with a March of Swirling Mist. He targets Talion and Sisay, but doesn't pay for the Rhystic. Noah then draws and responds with a Slaughter Pact, and after the table lets him know that it can't take out the Bowmaster, he does point it at Sisay, with Griffin in response casting a Deflecting Swat, as it won't do him any good with a dead Sisay. Noah will draw off the Rhystic, with Darren pinging Noah with the Bowmaster. Noah then casts a Burnt Offering to sacrifice the Thassas and gain a black and a red. The Slaughter Pack will fizzle, with Noah then following it up with a Brain Freeze for 15 cards on Darren.
Detutor, Ball, Balanced Oracle, Decon, Fierce, Otwara. Yeah?
Well, alright, now things phase
needed
out.
to bait my deflecting swat so that the storm count went up.
Sisay and Talion will then phase out. Darren then goes looking through the rest of his library using his last counter on his Wish Claw, and picks a card. He then casts a Psych Rift to bounce Hidden's Runestone, and let Noah draw another card, with him getting pinged for 1 from the Bowmaster. The bounce happens, but Darren realizes he miscounted his mana. He had to drop to 1 to cast the Psych Rift, and his only other land is a Polluted Delta. He then heads to attacks and sends the Bowmaster at Noah for 1, and sadly passes his turn. Griffin starts off his turn with an Oath of Nissa. He pays the 1 and finds a Saheeli Ray off the top 3, ending his turn there. Noah untaps, and we actually forgot the Pact fizzled, but Noah still pays the 3. Unfortunately, that Runestone was holding Noah back, as he casts an Entomb. Darren does have a Pact of Negation and pays the 1. Unfortunately, that irks Noah, and he then moves to combat and finishes Darren off with the Talion. Noah then on his second main casts a Mystic Remora into an Unearth, targeting the Spellseeker, with Griffin responding with an Urtai, who on ETB counters the spell and draws Noah a card, with Noah then casting a Reanimate instead. He grabs Dockside for the mana and is then able to cast a Bloodline Necromancer, and with the Inalla trigger can rebuy his Spellseeker and Thassas, with the Spellseeker getting Demonic Consultation off the ETB, letting Noah exile his library and wins off Thassa ETB. Game review. Man, Slicer is a house. I really thought I might be able to squeeze that win out, but with everyone colluding against me, it was just too much. Granted, there's always, if I had another turn I would have won argument, but that's not what happened. And this just makes me want to try out the new Slicer from the Assassin's Creed set even more. But going back to the Psychrift, I think even if it didn't hit my runestone, I think Noah probably still would have had the game, as the table fed him a bunch of extra cards, and with Griffin's life total getting pretty low as well, Noah would have had it eventually. Thanks to everyone that joined for the game, and before everyone leaves, I want to thank our special Patreon members, Slyfox, Tango Down, and Holy Septic for their support of the channel, along with all of our other Patreon supporters as well. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.